coordinate this.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another of our tours in the Garden of Artist Books. Your tour guide today will be Jan Dove, and you are in for a great treat. Jan had an early life that was pretty peripatetic because her parents were both in the military. She studied printing at Cal State in the East Bay, and then went to Chicago to the school at the Art Institute of Chicago for her MFA. I especially love Jan's books because they have story. It is not, I don't mean a linear narrative, but it has story. And I am also impressed with the way that Jan communicates, how art can be an impetus for change and also the instrument by which change can occur. And in aid of this belief that she exhibits, she has taught both in schools and in prisons. So you can see how change is an essential part of her work. It's my pleasure to introduce to you Jan Dove.
Well, good morning, everybody. I come to these book sharing things, and they're always so exciting to me, and I hope that my work will give you some joy. I'll start with this piece. I spent hours, just hours and days thinking, what is the thing about your work? What is it that makes it your work? And I couldn't come up with anything. So I'm sorry, I don't have anything. Some people can refer to something political or historical or, their poetry or whatever. But I think that you hit it off best when you said story. I love narrative. And I'm also, by nature, a collage person. I like putting things together and orchestrating. And I like printmaking. My degree is in printmaking. So all of those come together to make these things, which do not look like any one person's body of work, but they are. So I'll go with that. This is the piece that's in this show, and I'll tell you the little story about it. It's about one night when I was traveling, because I love to travel, and I travel cheap, so I was in my tent. It was winter in the Sierras, and I wasn't in the snow, but it was very cold, and I'm in my tent. And I hear outside the tent in the middle of the night, I hear ta-rum, 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 and of course, whoa, what's that? So I woke up and I said, sounds like horses. And I thought, no, it can't be horses. Well, maybe it's deer. And then I thought, I'll read you what I thought. We are tented on a frosted ground near the edge of a night forest. A pounding of hooves rushes close by. Deer, we ask? Let's hope it's not those 4 horsemen late for a logistics meeting. So this is the tent. And these are the drawings. Let me tell you a little bit how I draw. I do not draw on paper. No paper is harmed ever when I draw. What I do is I like to draw the figure, and so I'll pass that around. So as I draw, I go to a figure drawing group, and I bring my desktop, not my desk, yeah, it's my desktop. I bring a portable computer and a little Wacom tablet, and I draw directly into Photoshop. How many of you know Photoshop? Mm-hmm. So you have an idea of those transparent layers in Photoshop. So as I draw, I will make my lines. I'm a linear person. I make the lines, and each of the lines can go into a separate layer. And then later when I get home, I can take those layers and take the lines and rearrange them. I don't hardly ever stay with the actual figure that I drew. And I like looking at clouds and seeing things, just imagining what they are. And so I'm looking at these lines on the computer screen now, and I can start figuring new figures or animals or whatever. And you'll see the lines in that book, they're all from a figure drawing or from figure drawings that I've recombined. I've combined them with my digital photographs and manipulated them, and that's how I come up with a new image. So those horses were actually, they started out as a female model, I guess. Let's see, where to go? I do some deeply personal things. I want to show you a couple of books that I did when my parents died. My mother passed first, and I was, about a year later, I was in an artist residency in upstate New York. Blue Mountain, anybody heard of Blue Mountain? Yes, and it's just, I had this book that I had been working on, and I couldn't think of what goes with it. And so I went out into the place behind the studio that they gave me. It's a fenced-in place, or a screened-in room, and I sweated a little blood and thought and thought and thought and just listened to the environment there. And I had put all these old images together from my prints, and it was so weird. It's just so weird to me. But what came out was, as I came back into the room, into my studio, I had the feeling, as I came through the door, that there was something right there. And I looked, there's nothing I could see, but there was something there, I'll tell you. And so I added this to the poem that I wrote out in the addition, and it said, "And the mother said, 'Enter your studio. Someone is there waiting for you. Someone is waiting to be born. Tell your father I have saved a place for him. Tell him in the language of the crows. Tell him in the woodland crowned with crows. Tell him in beauty. Tell him in your grief. Tell him in the waters, cover him with salt. Weave for him a blanket of grasses. Sew for him a cloak of night feathers, your anger's lullaby. Fly with him through slipping winds. Fly with him to me." So I'll pass this on this way. And don't worry when you fold it back up, it's tough.
So is that printed on one piece of paper and then cuts, or are
Yes.
they? Yes.
Yeah, well, they were all separate pieces collaged together. I put them together in Photoshop and then printed on one big piece of paper.
Thank you.
Of course, they're back to back. This is the one I did for my father, and it's called the Father's Day. When I was living in the Bay Area, I lived close to a place in Emeryville where where there's a place where people can take their boat down a ramp into the water. And it became a magical place, and I noticed there were people going there and doing ceremonies, small personal ceremonies. And so I went there on Father's Day after my father died. And I took some nasturtiums, and I put them in the water, and I just watched them, and I took pictures of them as they moved. And I put the word "Mus" is eine harte Nuss, which is, pardon my German, I don't know German, but a friend taught me this. Must is a hard nut to crack. And so this is the beginning of the journey away from me. And I took some pictures. I like the contrast of the water and the glass and the soft thing, the two different kinds of existence. And then I wrote, your baptism with the sharks, a great thirst of small birds, and your long journey. here, take my shawl. One size fits all. So I'll pass this down.
Do you tend to do one-of-a-kind books, or do you do series?
Yeah, I do. I try to do some series, but yeah, they tend to, some of them you just can't
Yeah.
reproduce. In addition to doing small personal things like this, I like to do large pieces like artist book installations, and they're too big to bring. So I brought the packages of a couple of the installations and some photographs. This is an installation. I'll just show you the pieces. This is the pieces that I put together for the water book, which I also made at an artist colony for the lake. And take this part out. This is the book part. And this is made to float on the water.
Oh.
So it's installed on the water. I have a picture of it. And what the text is, well, you'll see, if you look at the text, you'll see that I have taken water definitions, and I just marked out some of the phrases, some of the words. This one, the part of it that I can see here is, she swam on the surface against the tide. So I'll pass this around, but I'm not going to take it out of the box because it gets too complicated. Let's see this side.
So like there'll be a pond and then you float it on top?
Yeah, but I have also, it looks kind of like this. There's a photograph of it in the water. I have installed it in shows. This was installed at the college in Wenatchee, where it's a dry installation. So I'll pass those around. This is an installation also that I did in the woods of that same artist colony. And if you look inside, these are the parts. When it's installed in the woods, it looks like this. Did you see?
Is this at the center of the yard?
That was installed at Blue Mountain Center.
No.
I'll take these are her regalia, they're her regalia trappings. Which you can see that these hang around her image. And this is the image.
I love her.
And it was funny because when you go to this particular artist colony, there's no internet. You have to go down in the basement and be ashamed and use what they have. And so one night at midnight, I saw this statue that was on a shelf that and I took this statue for my image, took a photograph up and blew it way up. And in Photoshop, I replaced the Christian images that were on her dress with images of organizations that protect the environment.
Oh, yeah.
And on the back, the text, which also you can pick little poems out of, is like so. There was one part of it that I really liked. But anyway, I'll pass it. Yeah, we'll pass it just in the box because you can get a sense of how it goes together.
How weatherproof is that?
Not. I wouldn't leave it out in the woods, but I have hung it in a couple of shows. So there's that.
You want this to go around?
Yeah, yeah, because, let's see. Okay, now, normally when I make something, I make it from, it has to come out of here. Comes out of here. I have no control. It makes itself. I call it a collaboration with the universe because I'm really into the accidents that happen. So I have a general idea, but the things build themselves. But I did have did find that I had an assignment once. I guess it was when at the University of Puget Sound, they had a show about, they had a show about dirt. And so I made this piece for that show. And this is about a Heidi Kyle construction, of course, that our children aren't playing in the dirt anymore. And they're becoming, having a lot of diseases, asthma, immune diseases. And so this is a thing that my husband and I talked together about the things that we did a long time ago. Throw dirt clods, hunt for salamanders, invent a play, turn rocks over, share a musical instrument, suck sour grass, ride a bicycle, share comic books in a treehouse. The things that we would hope that our children would have a chance to do. Plant a row of pinto beans next to the garage. Blow dandelion wishes. So that's what this is about.
Jen, what do you call that form?
I forget what she calls it. I just think of it as, there's an official name for it.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is. I did know it one time. Oh, this is paper made by, it's K paper, made by two women in,
Amanda DeGeneres and I can't remember the other
Yeah.
woman.
and I just thought it was so perfect for the idea of dirt. This was another one of those things where
Can I ask about the form? Yeah, they just call it a panel book.
is that what they call it? Thank you. I took another assignment for myself when the PSBA had the show to talk about this area. And so I made this book about, since I'm new here for 4 years now, going out in the evening and in Port Angeles. And I won't read you the whole thing, but this wonderful thing happened. It was the beginning of winter, and a bagpiper came out just at Vespers time. And I wrote this. Here's how it happens. The cloud sinks under the mountain to the south. Venus hums above. Red copter circles the sea to the north, and tankers shoot the harbor to light. A solstice breeze questions the darkness between the trees. The town below circles like a frost dog to begin its sleep. On the bluff above, bagpiper sings vespers, a little ragged but sad and sweet. So there's 4 of those, and this is now in my, so it's got some of my drawings in it and photographs. And it's, what do you call that what form, call that form when the, do-si-do, it's a double do-si-do.
Wow.
So it's a little hard to handle, but it was what I needed to get all these ideas in here. So there's 3 poems in here that represent the way I received Port Angeles in that period. And it's not just the nice things about Port Angeles, it's about heroin and the other things that happen in Port Angeles. Okay, so I'll pass that around. And I find it's easy just to lay it flat, and I try to open it all of the way, and then you can open it, and then open it, and then open it.
Jan, do you make your own boxes, or do you?
Yes,
And is it all your own poetry?
yes.
Yeah.
I know, did one book that was Walt Whitman, a poem that I really love, and that one got purchased for the University of Washington, and I'm so glad it did. But I thought, maybe I'm on the wrong track here. Maybe I should make more about other people's poetry. I love, one of the things I love about books is how people have to be involved to really understand the book. You can see the surface of a book and you see the beauty, but if you don't touch it and you don't, there's no way to understand what it's really about. How many of you are artist bookmakers? Okay, so you know what I'm talking about. So I made this one book. Also, this one also started when I was, well, okay, doesn't matter. This is a book of intellectual treats. I love puzzles. And so I found all these things on the internet. They're little things that make you want to just move them.
Wow.
And they have little writings on them. Miles Davis said, don't play what's there, play what's not there. So it's a book about play, and about play being the source of creativity. And so that's what this is, all puzzles. This is a book that goes in here. It's really a puzzle book because, well, you push your finger all the way through it, but how do you get those extra pages? And again, these are all my photographs. It's a good way to use up photographs. I don't think of myself as a photographer, but I use my photographs to make art. So, and this one is called Membranes. It has a poem about boundaries, linings, partitions, separations. Of course, you all remember these. So I encourage you to take these out and play with them. There's these, which are photographs I did from in Blue Mountain also. So you have one picture, you have two picture, you have three picture. So they're called flexagons, and you can find them on the internet. But oh, this one. This one starts out with one of my prints, and it's all messed up. But if you play it, you can get back to her. Wow. This is called the Book of Bonbons. This is from another installation. It's way too big to bring, but I just brought this part. It's about the figures that are printed on film, about that big, and you can see through them. There's about 12 figures, and as you look through the film, they all blend together, related to another book that I'll show you. But at the bottom, there's one of the figures' hands is coming out the bottom and reaching for a pile of river stones, which have, right, and you have one of these. Noli te bastardes cauperundum, say the young. It has happened, say the rest. I read that. I read the Handmaid's Tale many years ago, and that phrase just struck me. So this is a book that's built on the same idea, but it's a much different form, where the figures are printed on transparent film, and I won't be able to show you here, but I'll show you how it works. Sure, great, thank you. You can turn. It's okay to touch. You can turn the page, and as you turn the page, the figures make new compositions. And so you have pages on one side, pages on the other side, and what I'm trying to do is encourage the visitor to play with it and find new compositions with the work. And these are all done that same way I told you about with the computer files. Drawing in the computer. And you can turn more than one page or whatever way. This is an unsatisfactory solution to me, but it's what it is. It's Tyvek, and because it was coded for printing, it won't lay flat. You can print Tyvek. Okay. How are we doing for time?
That's an hour.
Okay. Then I'll show you this one. This is a story about a dream I had about this dog that wanted to get into a yard, but there was fence all around the yard. There was a house in the center of the yard that the dog wanted to get to. And so this book, which looks like this, and there's the dog. Looks like this. I know they're too big. We could, okay, yeah, that's good. Here's this story. Well, it's my poem about this. I'll just read one little part of it. Hoop of white skirts swirling, turn, 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 clap, turn, 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 clap. The accordion, the dance. Long sighs of would-be wild olive trees rise from an ordered plot. Freedom, another illusion smashed. Oh. It was always the mother house. Even now, the universal dog tries to find the way back to something long unfinished. So that's the story that goes behind this piece, which was all cut by hand with scalpel. And I've got to get my hands on an electronic.
Wow.
So here's, in the center is the mother house in the back. And here's all the different gates that go around it. And you see the dog going around and around trying to get through the fence back to the mother house. And I encourage you to, really inspect, because there's 3 layers of visual evidence there. And that's going to be the only one because it was all done by scalpel.
Oh, yes. It makes a really lovely texture, the handwork.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, all the white edge of the paper is like filigree. This is, it's kind of big. Maybe I should set it up here. This is, this one I did several years ago, and it's all drawings, figure drawings. But I had this whole page, the whole basket of them, and I said, what am I going to do with them? They're not interesting by themselves. So I thought I'll put them in an environment. And I had a photograph of a yard. I'm sorry if this is going to be out of the picture. Of a yard where musicians parked their cars, and in the yard was a photograph of a big gigantic wave. So I call this wave.
Oh my gosh, that's gorgeous.
I'll just leave that. So all the figures get to start interrelating, and then I hope that you get around and look inside.
It's so fun to play.
Because they're on both sides of the page.
Cool. Maybe put it in the middle of the table for
Yeah, it takes a lot more room.
yeah.
The best thing about it is that it just goes.
Is that like a wishbone?
I don't know, I just kind of made it up. Anyway, I'll pass this around, you can see the figures in it. And I think that's all the major stuff.
Such a collection of materials.
Oh, I'll pass these around too, please. I always tell people, please take my card, take 2, take 4, apply them liberally to the public.
Yeah, and I just love how multifaceted your work is. It's so integrative of all these different elements so beautifully.
I love puzzles, I love playing games, I like telling stories, and how they come out, that's kind of between the universe and God, I guess. I don't know.
You were a natural engineer.
Yeah.
I mean, you obviously like
Channeling.
problem solving.
Can you talk a little bit about your teaching, how you teach in schools and what ages and in prisons?
Okay, I started out teaching when I was too young in Catholic schools, and I've always loved teaching. My favorite thing to teach was art, of course, and I was a very bad teacher one time when the children, it was the beginning of the school year, I'm telling on myself, and the children all had their new boxes of crayons, and I wanted them to color with this, portion, and they want to do this. I went around and started breaking kids' crayons.
Oh, wow.
Bad teacher.
Good, I love it.
But I've taught in primary through high school. I've substitute taught a lot, and I get put in the art classrooms where the kids don't want to be there, which really makes me really sad. But the hardest and best teaching I've done was when I was working in prisons. I did for about 12 years. I was what they called an artist facilitator in the California state prisons. So I would find artists in the community, writers, actors, musicians, whoever had something that they could teach my students. And I would arrange to get them in the prison, which is a big deal, and I would arrange to get them out, and I would arrange to have all the tools counted and all that. But the teachers came in and they shared their skills with the inmates, and the guys in the, I call them Cerebus at the gate, they would, say, well, you're bringing milk and cookies to the prisoners. But the research that was done on those inmates, and these are like not nice kid inmates. These are, I'm Charlie Manson. The recidivism rate, what we call the recidivism rate of the guys coming back after they get out, was much reduced, like 80%, in the people who went through the program and who it was not therapy at all. I'm not an art therapist, but they had to deal with questions that they never would think to deal with and take responsibility. If their painting didn't work, I could say, it's just paint, it's just canvas, don't worry, do what you want. And they would be afraid. And I found out that they were afraid because they were having to think about what they didn't want to think about. And it just became very, very powerful. I had one woman come up to me in a class. We were doing collages, and she brought her work to show me. And there was, I forget, was at on the bottom of the page, but on the top was little tiny hands and feet. And I asked her about it. I said, can you tell me about this? And she said, well, I always wondered what happened to all the children that I aborted. So they were having to think of really impossible, horrible things and take responsibility. Well, we could make a parallel thing for them in their lives where if they didn't take responsibility for finishing the piece of art they could not blame that on anybody but themselves. They had to take responsibility. And when they did and finished it, they had a success, a very small success, but something that they could model in their lives. So in a way, the things that we did in that program were really, really powerful things. Although we were coming in as artists, I'm speaking to you as an artist. I don't care what you did in your past. I don't care what you're going to do in your future. Right now, we are two artists working together, and it was a really, really powerful situation. But I had to. I had to count all the tools.
Yeah, but just to help them define themselves as something other than a criminal or a person, you know, with
Or take
children.
responsibility for what they had done.
Yeah, wow.
And they didn't have to tell anybody.
Mhm.
You know, it was, but to take responsibility in their own mind, because we had so many people that just didn't make the connection.
Mhm.
And in a way, you had to make a connection through making art. I think I showed you everything. Oh, here, this is from a book I made. I didn't bring the whole thing. I just make books that just turn into libraries. This is
So cool.
This is one that, no, thank you, belongs to this collection. And it's a story of, well, my husband was very sick, and oh, okay. And there's a magnet in there, so you don't have to do this. And I was sitting in the waiting room waiting for him to come out of surgery, and I started writing this poem, and it turned into all these little volumes. So I'll take one out to show you. And it was about stones, because I'm new to the stones of Olympic Peninsula on the shores. So I took a stone. This is a stone. This is, what do you call it? Mica.
Oh.
And then I think I made up this, probably somebody else did it, but you have to open the book in the fashion of a stone rolling down the hill. So the inside looks like this. Each one of them has a set of drawings and a stone, and each one of these is a stanza from the poem. You are unquestionable as wild apples, verifiable as the mockingbird, indisputable as the moon, and you are undeniably obscure. You are a history of torrents substantiated by passion, and you are the intent of small nows. I am heavily seeking your eye in my dream. So each one that's one of the stanzas from the poem. And in the drawers on the bottom, when I made this, I was such a fool. I love this red linen, but it wasn't strong enough, so I backed it on black Arches cover. No. So I had the devil of the time to make everything, keep it from fraying. But inside each of the drawers is a little person, rock person.
Is that wire that's secure?
Yes, it's copper wire. Actually, yeah, no, it's telephone wire.
Oh.
It has that plastic wrapping around it, so it's iridescent.
Uh-huh.
So, I kind of would, I don't know, should I pass this around? It's kind of, you're welcome to pull things out.
Maybe pull some of the books out and
Yeah,
some
we can pass
drawers.
it around. So this was the one I liked. There was one stanza, the ending stanza of this whole thing about this conversation with the stones, I'm having with the stones. There are two old stones in the shallows. Together they watch over the new generation of salmon. Clack, return to the universe. So you're welcome to take those out. And shall I just take a couple of drawers?
Did you author that poem also?
Yes. My teachers used to try to tell me, stay still, do one thing, you know, be linear, and I just never could. I couldn't express that when I was a student,
Uh-huh.
but I think that, you know, your teachers will tell you, well, you all probably know this already, your teachers will tell you, be linear, get to your goal. And That's just not me. I think that my creativity anyway is a spiral. So I do something and I work and I work, and each time I come around or I'm repeating something, I have new skills, new ideas, and my work goes this way.
The definition of time.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just couldn't do what my teachers wanted me to do. Here's some.
Have the students whose crayons you broke come back to thank you?
That's so many years ago, they wouldn't even remember. Well, yeah, maybe they might
Or
remember.
they might.
Oh, they would remember.
That's
Yeah.
a growth memory.
Did the parents come and
Well, it reminds me of Picasso's quote about how perfection is the enemy of creativity.
Yes, yes.
And when it's so perfect, you're afraid to mess it up, and it's all about making the mess, yeah.
Yeah, it's about the mess, and it's about my one teacher used to say the happy accident.
Mm.
He would-
yes.
Yes,
God bless them.
yeah. I'll put this in. And finally, the last one. This is a book it's still in progress. I just got the first, the first iteration of it. And it's a story about when after I finished working in prison, I bought a small 20-foot motorhome, and I burnt the nest. My daughter was time to move out on her own and ready. She was ready for when she was 15. Anyway, so I moved out and I sold and I stored some, and for a year I traveled around the country. And the first thing I did was I went to all the volcanoes I could find. So I came up this way. And I had a residency in upstate New York. So I traveled across the country in that direction. Then after the residency, I came back by the south, and I wound up in petroglyph land. It was in the Southwest. It was so amazing. Well, this is a story of Christmas Eve when I came into Texas, and someone who was worried about me, a stranger, said, well, you need to go this way. So I went to this campground, and it was all manicured. And not really what I was used to camping, but it was cold. It was really cold, and we were slipping off the road, and there was ice in the pines and all of that. So if it won't go back, don't worry, it'll be fine. So anyway, I pulled into the campground, and all of a sudden I became ill. I was so sick. And it was Christmas Eve, and a man came out of a little Volkswagen camper across from me, and he had on a red hat, white hair, white beard, black shoes, and a red and black and white flannel shirt. And I just went, oh my God. And he came over and started talking to me. And I told him I'm an artist and I'm traveling. And I'm trying to draw these deer. And he said, you just wait, I'll come back. And he brought back a bag of corn. And he said, lay this in your garden. He was from Quebec. And he said, lay these in your garden and you will have many deer. And then he kind of think like he winked, but he went back into his Volkswagen because it was really cold. And so I laid the corn down on the ground, and of course the deer came, and so I could make drawings of the deer. Well, what he had told me was, I love your country, he says, and there is a place where you must go next, he says in his accent. He said, you must go to a place called Seminole Canyon, which is an archaeological site, is a park on the Rio Grande, above the Amistad Reservoir. And there, he said, and you must stay 2 days. So I said, okay. And I went driving across the country, of course, and I made a movie for myself. I'm driving in Bandito land, and and seeing all the devastation of the environment and all that. But I went into the park, and I went to register for a parking place, and the ranger at the desk said, he looked at me, he says, "Are you with the artist group?" And I said, "Well, I'm an artist, but I'm not with the group." And he said, "Do you know Nola?" I said, "I don't know Nola." "Nola, she's the best artist in Texas. And she is leading an archaeological group of volunteers into the caves that people can't go into. Do you want to be part of their group?" And I still wasn't sure. I said, "Well, is it some kind of a nice ladies painting group?" I really wouldn't be interested. But so I went down to the cave, and I looked at the first cave, and the paintings were on the wall. They're, of course, very, very old. They're thousands of years old. And I looked, and I saw some feet, and I looked up, and up, and up, and up, and up, and up, and there he is looking down at me. And my soul went, ah. You know how you get into a place where you know, I have to sleep with you. I have to sleep here. And so I signed up, and I said, "Yeah, well, I want to go."
Oh.
So I get in this group, and there's a whole things that happen in the story, but I'll read part of it. I'm in the group, and we're going down, we're starting our walk, but first they have to stop everybody. There's about 25 of us. They're architects and lawyers and writers and artists and, just creative kind of people. And we're going to be making pictures or drawing these pictures to preserve them, because the Amistad Reservoir has backed up the river, and there's so much moisture that the paintings are disappearing. So anyway, the first stop, I'll read just a paragraph on that. A very thin, severe-looking young woman announces there is a fungus that lives 6 centimeters under the surface of the cave floor. It causes coccidioidiomycosis in humans. About 2 weeks after it invades the body, the symptoms are flu-like. Then you get over the flu and you feel fine. Then it kills you. So don't kick up any dust and wash your hands before you eat. There are dust masks for people who want them. Someone in the group says, "And remember, you signed a waiver, folks." Dire as this sounds, Hannah decides it is mostly a warning to be careful, and she does not turn back. All in the group begin scrambling over brambles to a rock shelter where the public is not allowed. A woman named Gladys struggles in front of Hannah. Gladys apologizes, saying, "Your view of the canyon would be much nicer if you weren't behind me." Hannah says, between puffs, "All I am watching is my feet anyway, so it's no problem." "The tops of my shoes," Gladys exclaims. "That's all I've ever seen on these trips. If I had to find my way out of here alone, I couldn't, because all I've seen is the tops of my shoes." There is water seeping from the stones in places. It grows a greenish scum. Someone warns us, "Don't step in that. It'll take you down real fast."
I think so.
So this is drawings from the story.
Let's do these, right? Some of them you've seen. There's a
This was from a photograph somebody sent me. They had gone up on the bluff, and they sent me a slide of us sitting down in the canyon by the water eating lunch.
these.
But this is, I don't like this paper that I'm using in the middle. But this gives you an idea of what some of the paintings were like. And I had a real struggle with myself, because I thought, somebody's going to come up and challenge you about appropriating somebody else's images. And I thought about it a long time. I thought, should I do this project or not? And I just love the images so much. So I said, well, let's just draw them and see. And then I couldn't let go of them, and I kept thinking, how can I justify this? And someone said, you don't have to justify this. So part of the story, let me finish this. I wrote for the colophon page. Jan created the illustrations in this artist book from her memory, sketches, and photographs to honor the astonishing paintings of the people who lived thousands of years ago in the lower Pecos River area, now southwest Texas and Mexico, northern Mexico. So this is a book of homage to the people who made these incredible, just incredible images. And let me tell you about these guys. these are from memory, but I go through a lot of things with the person I work with in the cave, and in the transactions I break a ruler, so I have to take the ruler to Gladys, who's this guy's great aunt and the past president of whatever this Texas Archaeological Society, and I with great sorrow present the broken ruler and say, I'm sorry, can we have another one? And so she stops her work. Her work is down low at the bottom of the cave shelter. And she said that these people buried their dead in the back of the cave at the bottom of the wall. And I saw these little dogs that she was working on. And we were told that we can't interpret these because we don't know who these people were and what their ideas were. But I said to myself, this looks like the burial place of a much-loved child. So anyway, I never forgot them. They became part of the story. So anyway, if you want to see that, this still has a lot of work that I have to do on it, but this is the one that's in progress now.
But are these treasures really deteriorating?
Oh, yeah.
And they're not
Oh, yeah.
saved?
Oh, no, there's nothing you can do about it. The Amistad is here, the moisture is here. And it's not just the moisture, there's a place called Panther Cage, which is on where the Seminole River comes into the Rio Grande. The Amistad Reservoir is over here. The water comes up, and it's so high now that people can take their boats in, and there's a path up to this Panther Cave. So they had to put a fence in front of the whole thing, because people go in there and they do, jury was here, or worse, I've seen this in many petroglyphs, they do,
They shoot?
they shoot, yes.
Oh my God.
They'll take a huge sun disk and just use them for targets.
Practice.
Yeah,
Oh my God.
yeah.
That's horrible.
So anyway, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Oh, we have our business cards.
Thank you,
Thank
Jan.
you very much.